students, today's video is on AR verbs in the present tense. Please make sure that you're following along and that you're taking good notes on the note sheet that I provided for you. And then please make sure that you also write down any questions that you have so we can cover them as soon as you arrive to class. So, the first thing we need to figure out is what is an infinitive verb? This is a term that's going to come up throughout your years in Spanish class, so you need to make sure that you do understand this. An infinitive verb is a verb in its original form. So basically that means that it does not yet have a subject and it has not been changed or conjugated to agree with its subject. An infinitive verb exists in English, and oftentimes or almost always it's going to start with the word to. So like to be, to have, to study, to run, to read, to listen, they all will start with to and followed by a verb. Now, when you conjugate a verb, that means that your verb has now been given a subject, so you need to kind of change that verb to agree with its subject. A conjugated verb sometimes or often will look different than the original verb. So like, for example, in English, the verb to be, one of its conjugated forms is I am. That looks completely different from its infinitive form, yet it comes from the same verb. Or we have the verb to have, one of its conjugated forms is she has. Now this looks a little bit more similar to its conjugated verb than am and be, but it still is just a little bit different than the original. In Spanish, we have similar things, and we also know those two verbs, to be and to have. Ser, to be, one of its conjugated forms is soy. Then we have the verb tener, to have, and one of its conjugated forms is tiene. So again, we have now given it a subject, so it has been changed to agree with that subject, and the verb does look a little bit different than the original. So in Spanish, instead of all of infinitive verbs ending or beginning with to, they all end in either AR, ER, or IR. So in this lesson, we are going to primarily focus on AR verbs. So I'd like you to go ahead and take a minute, you might want to pause this video, to brainstorm some AR verbs that you know. Please write down all the verbs and their meanings in your packet. Okay, hopefully you could come up with a few. Here are some of the AR verbs that we have already learned from our previous units, or some are from the current unit. All of these verbs end in AR, and if you have not already written these down, I would like you to do so, and then I would like you to write down their meanings in English. This is going to be very helpful because when we start to use and conjugate these verbs, you're going to want to understand what they mean. So, I already told you what it means to conjugate a verb, but now I'm going to show you how. So the first step is conjugating a verb is taking off the ending. Like I said, the ending in Spanish to any of the infinitive verbs is either AR, ER, or IR. Your first step is to take off that ending. So in this case, you're going to take off the AR since we're working with AR verbs. Once you do that, you're left with what is called the stem of the verb. So the stem of the verb is everything except for the ending. And then to the stem, you're going to add new endings that are specific to the subject, and that will conjugate our verbs for us. So if you remember your subject pronouns that are in the chart to the right, this will significantly help you when conjugating your verbs. We use this same chart because it's kind of an organizational tool for us to organize our subjects and our verbs. So remember, we don't always have to use subject pronouns, nor do we always use subject pronouns, but you can, and so any subject we'll have can be replaced with one of these pronouns, so that makes it really easy to keep it in a little 6-box chart. We can organize our conjugated verbs. So, once you have removed your ending, so in this case it is AR, you should add the new endings depending on where your subject would fall into the chart that we've used. So, for yo form verbs, and keep in mind that this is just for regular verbs, some are irregular and we'll get into those later. This is just for regular AR verbs. So in the yo form, after you take off your AR, you will add O. In the to form, after you take off AR, you will add as. Él, ella, usted, a. Nosotros, amos. Vosotros, ais. And ellos, ellas, ustedes, han. Again, you are putting these endings on the verb in place of the AR that was on the infinitive. So for example, we have the verb hablar, to talk or to speak. First step would be to take off the AR of this verb, and then you're going to add your new endings based on your subjects. And then this is going to change the meaning of each verb. So we have yo hablo, that means I speak instead of just to speak. Tú hablas, you speak. él, ella, usted habla, he, she, or you formal speaks. Oops. Nosotros hablamos, we speak. Vosotros habláis, you all speak. But remember, we only use that form in Spain. And then ellos, ellas, ustedes, they or you all speak. So again, you can have a name or you can have a group of people as your subject, but always just keep these subject pronouns in mind because it's just going to help you organize your thoughts. All right, so now that you know how to conjugate a verb, I want you to practice your skills on the verb descansar. You can do this anywhere in your packet, and then please make sure that if you came up with any questions during this video, or if you come up with questions afterwards, you write them down so you don't forget them, so we can talk about them in class.